Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm making a video, and this is the long awaited visualization of the garden center concept. All right. So, this is a painting off the internet. Unfortunately, I can't remember who made the painting. Up in the corner there, it says Voorhees Joma Doobie Doobie. I'm not sure. Okay, but this is what we're talking about, these garden centers. A lot of people, it wasn't very clear what that kind of might look like. So this is just sort of an example. It's like a little, kind of like a village. Over here you got these little teepee type deals, like maybe a thatched roof structure, different types of little structures here. And so the vision on this is that then you have large amounts of land often off to the side there. And then you have kind of your gathering buildings over here, year-round types of spaces. So this is the type of thing that uh, people can visualize what we refer to with the garden centers, where it's a place to gather and doing initiation type of stuff and coming of age type of stuff and support within specifically the female community of any given region around the world. So the basic idea was that you would start to see things roughly like this, but probably on a larger scale. And there would be a chance for women across different generations to gather and to have craft zones. And I mean, I don't really know like what women are into, but whatever they're into, they could do it in here, these little different buildings and stuff. And then you have different ages and kids. You could have kids certainly of both genders, and you certainly could have some guys there. It's not like a hard and fast rule. And then I mean, you might have gay people or trans people, and they might be kind of go betweens, and they might go to both. Kind of like our man in the field type of thing, or vice versa. But it's not a hard and fast rule. But the idea was to generate some spaces like that. And so here you can see there's little animals, and this could be a kind of a hub for um, domestic animal management and skill sharing. And there's plenty of lands for experimental things. And then inside here there might be like some like archives and whiteboards and different types of maps of the entire region or city or whatever, geographical mappings. And so yeah, so the idea was that it's like a little village that's sort of like lost in time, so to speak, and very close to the earth. And it's a place for women to go and to get away from the dudes, and but then also to yeah, kind of have their own thing going on. And it's not to say that the mixed gendered spaces are bad. I mean, all kinds of things are still going to be roughly the way they are, and different businesses and all that with mixed genders. But it seems to me that there could be a real advantage to having specifically gendered spaces, especially when we talk about um, municipal governments um, being potentially uh, elected officials being female. And this gives a kind of like your brain trust. So then the generations gather. And this, a lot of things are interesting potentially, is that you might have ones that are racially mixed. You might have ones that are more racially self-segregated, or both. And and so, however it works out in a different region is going to vary from one region to another, and that's part of the beauty of it, is that local variation, whether it's mixed, whether it's differentiated, however it ends up working in that area. And And so you can kind of see why it starts to become sort of an idyllic and cool place that people hang out at. That's completely apart from all the masculine architecture of the rest of society, because uh, historically the entire architecture of society has largely been masculine. So it doesn't mean that that women are better architects or anything, but there could be something to be said for having female spaces on this type of scale. And you're not gonna, if you look at this particular drawing, you're not gonna get huge numbers of people here. But then you don't also know. I mean, it would totally vary on the size of the city or the municipality. But even in a lot of suburbs, it wouldn't be that hard to carve out something like this on 4 or 5 acres, or to find 4 or 5 acres. And but then it's not going to be clear. You're still going to have politics. It's not like it's a utopia where everything is just solved in advance for you. There's still going to be, okay, what if lots of people want to go hang out there, but there's only so much space, and all types of different questions. How's it going to get paid for? And then insurance and different legal things. But the idea that there's like kids running around, down here, there could be like what do they call those, like military training courses with the ropes and the walls and climbing underneath things and all that stuff, or for kids to do, could be a part of that situation. There could be a little fairy gardens and storytelling hour, or different ages. And so this is the image that I was able to find online that most described the vision. And I realized that a lot of people, when I was talking about garden centers over the last couple of years, they would have had no idea like what the vision was. So this makes it a little more clear. I mean, a lot of people, when they think about garden center, they would just be like, maybe a building like that and some greenhouses and a lot of plants and stuff. And they wouldn't have had the sense that it was actually kind of an eco village. But the vision really was more of this type of eco village type of sanctuary, almost like a place that's lost in time, almost like a hobbit village or something of that kind of idyllic nature that gives a complete sensory reset. And on the other side of that conversation, there was the topic that hasn't come up nearly as often, but it was also mentioned, which was sort of the male side of this, which was a craft works or an eco warehouse manufactory. Okay, so this is the design now we're going to switch to. I called it down here Super Eco Warehouse Micro Factory Design Concept. And so things that can get manufactured here, any types of yurts, tiny houses, tow behind campers, rocket stoves, 4-season tents, sheds, horse barns, shipping container modifications. You could also have smaller things like hand tools. You could have fences. You could have all types of trellises. And the idea is that a lot of it is made from these types of products are made from local materials. So it's not that we are bypassing the global supply chains, right? Because we're developing population boom. And so we're doing multiple things at once. As the population boom starts to happen, and we're developing seasonal movements of people from cities, or weekend or monthly movements from cities out to suburbs, then you have these temporary surges in population in the suburbs that create interest for people. They inspire people who are hosting. They give you a reason to have your life dialed in, but they also create a breath of fresh air for people from the cities. And so having these types of products be more readily available and have them be manufactured from local materials is something that's going to be a benefit. So over here, this is just one design concept. Over here, you can see it says Bank of Repurposed Automobile Engines, so there's actually science to that. So this is, there's real engineering that goes into this stuff. So you got a whole bank of repurposed automobile engines over here. Maybe you got a gas tank over here. You probably could have a LNG, liquid natural gas tank over here, because liquid natural gas is great for manufacturing plastic goods. So then you could have a 3D printer inside You know, I got a conveyor system for finished painting and deburring, etc. So you see, you just got a conveyor system. And then you get a bunch of kids out here, 12, 15, 18-year-old guys, and they're just working on this conveyor for like an hour or two, right? And then, so this is like multiple ages. And then here's like a finished product that's getting ready to get moved somewhere with the fork truck. You know, it's going to go out here, it's going to get sold. Somebody might be doing work trade for a finished product. So then you go through cycles. People who are doing it in the work, then they get a better deal on a product. So then you all of a sudden you got a tiny house in the backyard. And then when people come to visit, whether it's kids from the city or friends of yours or whatever, you got a tiny house in the backyard, or maybe it's a garden shed. And see, these are on casters down here also, you can see, so things can be deployed, moved in and out. And we're going to find out that these hubs is one idea for a craft work. So this starts to be kind of your in some ways like a hub, similar to the garden centers, but for guys, and you're doing this manufacturing. And again, you can have women over here, and you know, you can have lesbians or straight women or trans women or whoever. It's not about a strict differentiation. It's about an overall kind of direction of travel for these. You know, it's a masculine space. It doesn't need to be only men, but it just means that it caters explicitly to that energy. You know, in the same way at the garden center, it's not exclusively women, but it caters specifically to that energy. So here you have stamping pressing machines, you have plywood saws, you have little different types of saws, and they're all deployable, so you can move them in and out for different projects. So one week you might be making tiny houses, you might be making the roofs or the flooring, and then you've got your raw materials in the back here. You know, I just had it divided up real simple. Like this is plywood over here, this is PVC piping, this is maybe some sheet metal rolls. Here I got corrugated fiberglass sheeting, which, you know, for roofing of small structures. Here I got my lumber, 2x4s, 4x4s. Here I got more rolls of different types of tarp material. Here I got all type of rebar. And then on the roof I got solar panels, so it's a multiple energy system. I got solar panels then down here, along with these banks of repurposed automobile engines and your gas for those engines. And so then it becomes just what it says, like a manufactory and a place to hang out. So the idea here was that I noticed that a lot of these men's clubs, they seem to just involve sitting around drinking and stuff. And I was like, well, what if instead of sitting around drinking, they had like a really cool factory to make stuff in their free time, you know? And you could move all this stuff out of the way, and then 1 week out of the month, it's a car garage. And then you pull out your car lifts and your car tools, and you might have like a separate storage location, and everything's on casters. So you convert the whole space. And then 1 week out of the month, you got just a bunch of guys hanging out in a massive warehouse working on cars together. You might have a section that's cordoned off for body work. You know, you might have a section where it's separated, it's airtight for doing custom paint jobs on cars, or doing all kind of finish work. Or you can change out the entire place to where 1 month out of the year you're doing finish work, and then 2 months out of the year you're doing manufacturing, and 1 month or 1 week out of the year, out of the month, maybe you're doing a maintenance. So people are bringing in, you know, you convert it to a maintenance shop. So every 6 weeks, 1 week, everybody can just bring in their lawnmowers or bring in their weed whippers. And so you say, well, if people are maintaining their lawnmowers and weed whippers, what's going to happen to the lawnmower and weed whipper market? And the key thing is that this all works because we're doing population growth, right? We're doing population growth, which is what means that we maintain our supply chains and the value of our large corporations. And simultaneously, alongside that, we're developing this enjoyable, authentic, local economic structure. So as AI allows us to have fewer hours of work that we need to get done professionally, We're going down to 35 hours a week, and that gives everybody 5, 10 hours a week to go down to the craft works or to head over to the garden center, which we saw in the other image. So when we look at this type of building, and there can be an upstairs here. There can be an upstairs here where there's like a music studios, or there's offices, or where there's gaming computers, and the idea is that all this kind of stuff, people get isolated. There could be a little cinema area, but even something like gaming, right? Instead of having 20 guys in your little neighborhood who are all sitting in their basement gaming, what if you had those 20 guys and they all had little gaming stations in the same room? Then all of a sudden it becomes something that's not as depressing, and it's not taking guys away from their natural sociability, because they're in a room with other guys who are mostly like them. They like to they want to be pounding those energy drinks and playing their games. But at the same time, you got older dudes in the community who are popping in and being like, hey, you guys remember that you're still normal human beings. So I need you to go downstairs and help out on the conveyors for 2 hours here, and then you can go back to your video games. Understand what I'm saying? So everything becomes this larger system. And outside of these warehouses, you have land. I mean, this could be like at a sportsman's club where there's already 20 acres, right? So then you have woodland that's managed. You could have Ewok villages, massive tree houses. You could have obstacle courses, paintball courses, all kind of stuff that's good for kids to develop their physicality. You could have your campground, which ends up becoming kind of your outer chamber pathway into your more advanced participation in the fraternal culture of your local city, right? So you could have a campground that's like semi-public, semi-private for kids whose dads have been putting in time in this structure, and then they can go there. They could even be grandkids. So you go visit your gramps, and then you camp outside the manufactory, and it's like the clubhouse that everybody dreamed of, and they almost forgot that they even used to dream of that because they've gotten into that routine for so long. It's the same with the garden center. I'm just trying to point out things that we all have wanted our whole lives, and we just are so used to not having it that we forget that we even want it. So up here, I got some notes. Maybe you could employ up to 200 people. You could have students, you could have migrants, people who are even free workers on a work trade, so they get room and board. So this could refer to people who are international students in the university protocol that we've discussed elsewhere. You could have disabled veterans who are able to live on site, right? Maybe they're not able to hold down regular jobs, but they could be perfectly useful and productive here in this type of situation and scenario where they can lie down when they need to. If they're on heavy-duty pain medication, they might not be using the power tools, but they could still hang out by the conveyors and pitch in, or they could do, depending on physical limitations, they could accommodate that and have that sense of community. So veterans might be able to live free on site. This could be running 18, 20 hours a day. This could be running 24 hours a day and powered by a hybrid electronic power system based on grid power, recycled auto engines, solar power, hydrogen, or whatever the case may be. And so the basic idea from an architectural standpoint with both these eco-warehouse manufactories and the garden centers was that we could see tens of thousands of these all across worldwide, right, becoming pillars of a global architecture. And so then what do the numbers look like on that? How much, where are these walls coming from, these roofing materials coming from? How does that crack down? Well, that's why you need a revitalization of local cultivation of useful plants, right? Because you're not going to necessarily have enough plywood, PVC pipe. It just depends how the numbers work out. But to stock tens of thousands of these, in addition to all the big box stores that are already stocking them, that's why when you work in conjunction with these garden centers that are growing, fast-growing native plants, for example, bamboo, is a major asset, because then all of a sudden you're going to have PVC pipe, but you're also going to have bamboo that you can use to make flooring. You can use to make sheets of different materials. You can use to make mats. You can use to make tool handles. And so whether these shelves are stocking materials that are coming from distant global supply sources, or whether they're being stocked locally, is something that can just be negotiated and figured out on a case-by-case basis. So now these are some of the considerations that I came up with when this idea was first coming around. So see if I can keep it in focus. You know, for any situation involving veterans or guys that might have a PTSD or trauma, you know, you could think about cannabis, you could think about comfrey, you could think about hops and barley. These could all be growing on site for healing and pain management. So, you know, you might have over here to the side, you might have some breweries, or you might have a local brewery that's able to work with you to give special deals on a couple of kegs because you're supplying them with hops, right? So you can supply some of the materials, and then you get free beer, you know, for your veterans or for your old timers who put in a strong shift, and then they can have that as a perk. You know, marijuana or the marijuana plant is extremely useful for other types of manufacturing processes like cordage and clothing. So you can certainly envision that at the garden centers and having that multiple, you know, the buds are great for pain for a lot of people, whether they got severe back pain or whatever. And then the plant fibers are extremely useful for other purposes. So just thinking about these multi-use plants is something that can be considered when it comes to healing and pain management, because, you know, you don't want to necessarily get people addicted in the long term, but oftentimes if you get them on something that helps with the pain, then they can have more motivation and get doing some exercises that'll help bridge the gap until healing technology comes into play, where you can have hybrid systems that are helping guys out on a deeper level, helping to rebuild tissues, you know, using elaborate biotech solutions in addition to exercise methodologies. You know, another note here, this is just kind of common sense. In general, you put gardens on the south face of large structures, and then larger perennial plants closer to the building, so towards the northern side of the garden. Otherwise, they will shade out other plants. Otherwise, you can also run cables down from the eaves, right? So you have like an eave at the top, and you run cables down for vining plants, such as hops, kiwi. Baby kiwis is another vining plant. It's like a delicious fruit. It's rich in vitamin C that you can grow in a lot of different climates. All types of vining plants, beans, cucumbers, melons. And once they're on that south side of a building in full sun, and you're growing vertically, you can get a huge amount of volume. And so and in addition, it prevents loss of cool air in the summer, because you have vining plants growing up the southern face of the building. And then it also provides raw materials for beer making or for your compost systems. And then animals is the opposite. So in general, if you have animals, you put those on the north. Rabbits, ducks, goats, chickens could all work. You know, I didn't mention pigs, but if it's a woodland area, you could certainly have pigs. And now that once we're getting to more advanced levels of e-collars, the idea of having behind the building here, having some animals and that can forage and clear land and add compost. And remember that we talked about the benefits of animals for soil building. So this is all multifunctional towards the long-term goals of ecological remediation. And then, so you have these animal coops. You can have multi-story animal coops along the north side of the building. And then those animals actually warm the building at nighttime because of their radiant heat. Okay, so this is all like permaculture design principles. And animals also provide dung for compost and soil building, like we just talked about. as well as meat, eggs, and dairy. Ducks and chickens provide soil aeration and pest control as well. So you can always have animal processing right on site here. And again, this isn't going to drive out of business your larger scale animal processing plants, your industrial agriculture. It's just to complement and supplement that. Especially, you want to have something that's really pure and local for your young families, and in particular for your women who are of childbearing age and for your young children. You want to make sure that they have access to that top quality local animal products. Um, at any cost. You want to make sure that that's available. So, you might still have your older guys, you might not have as much, but then, there's always politics involved. You're figuring out who gets access to what. But in general, you would imagine that your young mothers and your young children would get primary access to the best quality ingredients for the sake of your long-term social stability. And then down here on the east side, a dormitory could be reasonable with simple rooms that share a well insulated wall with the larger factory space. So let's say this is your east side over here. The idea is that this could be a dormitory structure. So you might have 2 stories worth of rooms, and they're just simple. They're just simple rooms because you got hangout space in the public and in the outdoor regions. So you don't need huge rooms. And it could just be a getaway. This could be overnight. This could be like overnight childcare for middle school and high school age boys, for example. So they just get out of the house and they come down here. I mean, it could be 2 nights a week even, or it could just be 2 nights every 2 weeks, or a long weekend every month, or it could be a whole week every month. And you have adults down here, and there's this stuff going on that just completely balances out the intellectual aspect of school and the athletic vigor of sports. And you have this exciting manufacturing. And again, you might have auto maintenance going on certain days out of the week. You might have a clean space to do finish painting work 1 week out of the month. You can have a tool repair and maintenance, whether it's power tools or hand tools, that could be going on 1 week out of the month. And all those usages are happening. And so this becomes a real hub of your local male community. These micro craft works. And yeah, and you could have overhanging roof. You could also have tiny houses set up at ground level. You could have yurts, different types of sleeping options. And down here, while high ceilings are great, there could be a partial second story. You could have brewing going on up there. You could have winemaking equipment. You could have animal butchery equipment. You could have an industrial kitchen. You could have tool maintenance and blade sharpening. You could have your computer lab up there. You could have guys up there who are managing. You probably don't need community surveillance because you already have police officers who do that kind of stuff. But you could just have gaming and an idea hub for incubation of businesses or whatever. You could have billiards and a game room. You could have different types of little gambling. Not high stakes but low stakes, just for fun type of stuff. You could have a recording studio. You could have a dining hall, a movie room, all up on the second story, if you wanted to, for example, in your local manufactory. And then what happens is that every community has its own style and its own imprint of how they design things. And they might all use these same permaculture principles, which are going to make sense in the larger design. They're going to give you timeless design elements, but the architecture of it itself could have a local flavor depending on the region, for example. And so these almost become something exciting and interesting to travel and visit. So you could be a traveling guy and you might visit different pubs, or you might visit different things in different regions, but then you could even stay here in one of these rooms, or, depending, you could stay at a nice motel and just come hang out here during the day and put some work in and just be part of the practical culture of the local scene. And then down here, we're talking about water catchment. So one of the advantages of any type of large roof structure is water catchment. So the larger the roof, the more water you're catching. So water catchment is always a priority. Having roof overhangs for equipment storage, sheltering of tents, yurts, and tiny houses, and animal pens are good excuses to maximize roof square footage, and hence to maximize the amount of water that goes into your ponds, berms, and cisterns. So a lot of people are not going to be aware of what a berm is. So a berm is like a ripple in the landscape that creates circumstances for water to permeate down without running away on the surface in heavy rain events. So when you have a large roof and you only got a couple gutters, you're going to have water that's flowing really fast, and it's going to tend to wash away the topsoil and develop a porous situation and just go straight down. And what you want is for that water to actually be distributed across a larger surface area when it comes out of a gutter. So that's why you set up these berms. And so a pond, everybody knows what a pond is, but a berm is like a long row, like a long hill, like basically a row of long hills. Like if you picture like a tilled land, or I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but you get a row of hills, maybe just 5-6 feet tall, and then troughs, hills and troughs. And so that water from these downspouts goes into these berms and it trickles down. And oftentimes these berms, you put rotting wood in there, so it becomes very fertile, and it creates a profound soil culture. And then cisterns is for your storage of potable water. Of course, people know what cisterns are. That's just like a large, oftentimes they're plastic jugs. And you might, generally speaking, they're below ground because otherwise the sun will start to degrade the plastics, and the plastics will contaminate the water a little bit. But if you put them below ground in a concrete surrounding, then you won't have the soil degrading plastic from the outside. You won't have the sun degrading the plastic. It depends on the materials. But anyway, ponds, berms, and cisterns are 3 different ways of storing water. So here in the drawing, I didn't extend the roof, but what I'm saying here is that this roof would actually be extended in all directions. So the roof is quite large compared to the footprint here. And the sun will still get in, especially to the lower parts of the southern face. And then on the back, it provides shelter, that extra roof space. So then you have your animal pens back there, and they can be sheltered from the rain and from other weather events. And then the secondary function, when you have a larger roof, as we mentioned, you're catching more water for your ponds, berms, and cisterns. See what we got on the back here. DTPs, the Human Pathways Trade. This is page 2. We're not going to get into that. Over here, more considerations for the Eco Warehouse Manufactory. Things that move are fun and versatile. So where possible, you're going to substitute accordion walls, hideaway garage doors, sliding barn doors for permanent walls to improve airflow, natural light, and versatility of the indoor space. So, if you're not an architect or a designer, you might not understand all this terminology, but these are just ways to make your indoor space more versatile and also more interesting. And there's a lot more. Things that just think about what's enjoyable for inspiring a childlike sense of fun. Anything that involves a pulley, for example. So dumbwaiters and pulleys, like you can have systems rather than just having an industrial elevator. You could have a pulley system that guys have to actually physically pull on these ropes to then hoist up. So if you got a wine system up here or whatever for your animals, you slaughter your animals in the back, and then you got to bring them upstairs for processing. You can have all types of different pulley systems or elaborate, interesting engineering designs in here. And and you can have your high school kids, you could have your local community colleges, your local four-year colleges, you could have your local engineers. You're having design competitions to set these up. I mean, in a city of 100,000 people, you might have 4 to 6 of these, right? So you're having design competitions, you're getting the community involved. And then in a state, in a state like Illinois or like Florida, you might have literally 200 of these, right? Just all over the state that are creating this infrastructure of interest and participation in the practical economy. So similarly, having tools and tables on casters, we already talked about casters. All that means is just little wheels underneath your tables and tools that can save a lot of headaches if the workflow changes over time or from one day or one week to another. And then for vertical space, creative use of pulley systems and dumbwaiters, just what I was talking about. Pulley systems and dumbwaiters can allow for even large tools to be hung out of the way but still readily available for seasonal jobs. So imagine this whole conveyor system, when you're converting the space, is just connected up to a couple pulleys, and it goes zoop, and it just goes up into the ceiling. It just disappears into the ceiling. And then down here, you're able to do other stuff. I mean, that's the type of enjoyable engineering that you really what you want, right? And as the population grows, you can build more and more of these manufactories because this whole thing is ridiculously cheap to construct. It's just a warehouse. It's just got big walls and, some beams. Could be I-beams or whatever. And, got some solar panels up here. That might cost a few bucks, and of course your electric. But overall, a lot of this isn't very expensive infrastructure. It gets to be more expensive once you start getting your tools involved. But then the idea is that starts to pay for itself once you're processing local materials, right, that you're getting for free from your garden centers and even from your on-site production facilities. I mean, you could have a whole bamboo forest off to the side here somewhere, right? And then the guys are just harvesting bamboo and bringing it in here and making different types of materials or flooring or walling, or I know walling probably isn't a word, but all types of different stuff and other fast-growing plants that you can use to make reeds and make roofs for little eco huts and different types of projects. So down here in terms of size, I put roughly 20 by 30 meters or 60 by 90 feet. I mean, it could easily be bigger than that. And then even with a good sized campground, garden, animal run area, 2 warehouses every 3 acres is a fair estimate, or roughly 1 warehouse per plot of land the size of a football field. Or for a 40-acre farmland plot, you could have 4 warehouses, right? So these numbers is a lot more warehouses than what I just mentioned. I mean, I mentioned in Florida you might have 200, but you could have easily 4 warehouses in one 40-acre farmland plot, depending on whether your level of community engagement is at. And you have lodging for 20 permanent, semi-permanent residents, temporary residents, and you're only sacrificing, 1/6 of the land that you currently are in plow and spray agriculture. So some of these numbers here, I might, this isn't written in stone. This was just thinking out loud here because it all depends on how productive your agricultural systems are in conjunction with your garden centers and your other land use initiatives that you have going on here. But then you're manufacturing your tiny houses, rocket stoves for your heating, and even providing these facilities for your local meat production is just such a massive benefit to your local community. And it's going to generate optimism in the younger generations of saying, well, we know that no matter what happens, we're going to have healthy local meat and animal products. So some guy is like, well, yeah, I want to have a family, but I'm not sure if my mid-20s I'm going to make enough money to buy organic meat, but I want my wife and my kids, to be able to have access to that. Well, this creates a pathway that even if a guy is just doing an internship or he's not making a bunch of money in his 20s, he's still able to start a family. And these young women can have confidence that they're going to be able to have access to massive amount of free, locally available manure and compost and labor. So, yeah, so that was pretty much it. I just wanted to come back on here and share a little bit more of the vision for revitalization of local culture, because from the sociology of culture is something that I learned when I was already in my early 20s, is that you have to have physical places for people to gather. And at that time, I was focused on democracy, but this isn't so much about democracy, although it does lend itself to democracy, because within these structures, you can easily have you can have a debate space to debate different political initiatives that connects. It could be also at the warehouse structure. So, uh, I'm circling back to that and making a video. This might even go on the YouTube channel, and the scalability and the way that it brings communities together and gets people off their sofas and into these shared spaces that aren't just shared spaces, but they're shared spaces that have a momentum to them, right? So they get the mind focused on these processes that are being have their own timelines. So it takes away the decision fatigue. You just show up on any given day and you see this, that going on. You see, oh, okay, I can plug in here, plug in there. And all of a sudden, it's like subtly resolving mental health issues because you're just getting involved in this flow of your local community.